All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Another episode of High Pundit coming at you, Season 2, Episode 50. Kind of an emergency broadcast tonight. We do have co-host is actually on a date night down in Dallas, so shouts out to Jared. Hope you're having a great time with Sierra. But welcoming longtime friend of the show here, Jake Shapiro. Jake, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for the peoples?
Yeah, I'm just tweeting out the link right here from my account. For those who don't know, my internet all right, buddy? Just making sure. I've had some internet issues. Okay, cool. I can always go hardline. Cool. I work for the Fan now called Denver Sports. Bounced around the media for almost a decade. Covered the Rockies, covered the Rapids, covered the Nuggets, covered the Avs, covered the Broncos a little bit. So basically, if there's a ball and someone's kicking it, throwing it, or screaming at it, I'm there. I'm covering it. I'm writing about it. I'm tweeting about it. On camera talking about it. And I love sports. I'm from Boulder, Colorado, and through and through hardcore CU Buffalo, unfortunately for this podcast. But it does make for some fun times between you and me, Joel.
Hey, yeah, I gotta say I am really excited to see what Coach Prime does for y'all. Like, that's just like a win for Colorado, just the state in general. And like, rivalries be damned, like, it's like I'm super stoked to see what you guys are cooking up over there.
Yeah, it's funny because every Ram I've talked to about this is like, yeah, I'm actually rooting for CU. Like, I want it to do well this year. Like, this is interesting. Man, if y'all got Dion, I would not be rooting for the Rams. I would be trolling you guys at every minute. I'd be trying to find a way, like, what are you guys doing? Like I'd be preying on the downfall. Like, I don't know. That's just me. Like, a rivalry is a rivalry. And I'm not going to be the guy that sits here and goes, oh, no, Nebraska's really Colorado's rival or the Utah Utes. Like, I knew what it was in school. Like, I went up to Fort Collins. I was on those trips. I knew what it was. And, as college sports, particularly here in the state of Colorado, has become more regionalized and localized, it has become more of a rivalry because of that so much, as well as everything else, because it's more or less like, well, these teams aren't playing for anything of importance. They're only really playing for who's the best here in this like 90-mile radius.
Yeah. And man, just going back to those trips, it's damn near been a decade now. Just kind of looking back at it, it's insane how the time flies. But man, because our longtime friend Trevor introduced us way back in the day. Like, I'm talking way back, and I think we actually met prior to like your trip up there, because we were always coming down to Boulder for my friend Christian, who always was running with you guys anyways, like those first couple of years. So it was,
I think we first met in 2013. So I think we met 10 years ago. And I think I went to a CU CSU hoops game up in Fort Collins where I kind of hung out with you, stayed at your house back in like 2014. I think me and you had like a whole day me and you spent together in like 2014.
Yeah. Dude, just thinking back to that day, it was Buffs Rams in Fort Collins. It was back when the Rams kind of had a little bit of a squad. They weren't as down bad as they were, last year, but by any means. Buffs ended up winning that game, if I'm not mistaken. But
yes.
But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, reason for this kind of emergency podcast, we are going to be talking some Nuggets tonight. We've been kind of patiently waiting for just who we're going to play. I mean, I don't know about you, man, but I'm happy we're not playing the Lakers, not necessarily due to the overall talent of that team.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Ultimately, I think of any of the four play-in teams, the Nuggets would have wiped the floor with any of the four of them. I think the Lakers might have given them 6, which would have been the hardest series. They're also the most physical team of the bunch. And, you're a big Avs fan, big hockey guy. I am too.
Yep.
One of the keys to the Avs success last year was how quick they made it through the playoffs, right? Like, they got through, and granted, it's playoff hockey, so you do get injured, but they got through with a limited amount of injuries, considering how many games they played, how tough it was, and they just kept rolling through. And I think that's one of the reasons why they were so successful. So I was asked this question a bunch the last 3-4 weeks at the radio station. Who do you want the Nuggets to play? And everyone said like, oh, I would hate to play the Warriors. I thought the Warriors would have been a great matchup for the Nuggets. I think they would have walked the floor with them. But ultimately, I never thought the Nuggets would have not beaten the Lakers or not beaten the Clippers. I just think that there's different variances to the levels of skill and difficulty in each series. And I wanted the Nuggets to play the easiest opponent in the first round. I think the only opponent the Nuggets could have played that would have been slightly easier that actually made the play-in/playoffs would have been New Orleans. I think Minnesota was the second best option. And then you're really looking at the Jazz. Like the Jazz, if they made it, that would have been awesome for the Nuggets. But ultimately, I think Minnesota is a really good match for the Nuggets, which is funny that I'm saying that because they have 4 All-Stars or former All-Stars in their starting 5. But that team just that team doesn't move me. Like, I don't think they're very good. They're a solid team. They've got some nice things, but they don't play good team ball. There's a reason why they went 42-40. They're very up and down. They're mediocre. I don't think they're coached well. I think, their executive made one of the stupidest trades in NBA history, as we all are kind of lamenting. So I'm in a spot where I really like where the Nuggets are heading into Sunday, particularly because of how rest here we are ready for Minnesota Wolves, who by the only not a back-to-back, won by 35 points this year. So in their one of the 4 matchups, they didn't play in a back-to-back. So I feel pretty good about where the Nuggets are right now.
Mm-hmm. And I love that, man. Like, I'll tell you, Jake's got to listen. He got to listen to this show just because he kind of echoed what Jared and I were talking about last year with the Warriors matchup. And it's unfortunate that, we didn't have either one of those 2 guys in Porter or Murray for that series, because with the way that we lost those last few games against them, like it's a close-ish 5-game series. And if we had either one of like a healthy MPJ or a Jamal Murray, they completely changed the spacing of that series to the point where they're not throwing the kitchen sink at Jokic. And I honestly think that gets pushed to 7 games alone if the Nuggets could kind of catch like that little roll that we generally just sort of see them sort of get on when healthy, mind you, in the playoffs. So 2 years coming though. Like we've been waiting a couple of years for this now, it seems like. And the Lakers whistle, man. I mean, take it back to like that bubble series. I remember, you and I had a couple tweets that, we were obviously just like, okay, like what's going on here? You got LeBron kind of like right into the league a little bit. Then afterwards you get like one of the most disparaged quarters as far as free throws goes in a Western Conference Finals. And for them to do that with, no fans present just kind of is even worse when you think about it, because I don't know. I'm not a fan of the officiating that's attached to the Lakers. And for that, like they're a legit threat in a playoff series.
Nikola Jokic got into foul trouble in the bubble in a game he did not commit a foul in.
Yeah. Like there was like a moving screen. They called like a foul on like a screen. It wasn't even a moving screen. Like, let's be for real. Dude ran it like it was. Oh, I saw some of that footage the other day, and I was like, I am glad we're not getting that. I'll be for sure.
So like they're in a good spot because they don't have to deal with that. Obviously everyone's kind of already looking to round 2 with the Suns. That's going to be a nightmare to be involved in with the national media and the way fans are going to react to that and whatever. But I think the people that have watched the Nuggets the last few years and watched them in depthly know they won a playoff series with Marcus Howard playing huge minutes and Austin Rivers being a starting guard. You mentioned the Warriors series last year. I agree with you. That goes 6 or 7 games simply with Michael Porter, let alone Jamal Murray. Jordan Poole has never looked like that Jordan Poole before or after that series because the Nuggets didn't have – it's amazing, Joel. They replaced two guys that have all-star capabilities in Porter and Jamal with guys who couldn't play defense or offense. Like they were me and you could have been out there. It didn't matter. Like Nikola willed them. Bones got hot, won them a game. It's a night and day situation to where they are now. But you look at this Minnesota team, and the one thing they do have oodles of is size. And particularly with their I think their second best player in Anthony Edwards, at least for now. He very well could end up being the best one of him and Karl Anthony Towns. And that is a guy the Nuggets could not have in any world guarded last year. There's not a single guy on the Nuggets roster that could have guarded him last year because you would have needed to put Aaron Gordon on Karl Anthony Towns and Nikola Jokic on Rudy Gobert. I think this year in this playoff season, you have the ability to actually put Aaron Gordon on Anthony Edwards, play him low, and put Michael Porter Jr. on Karl Anthony Towns with the help side coming from Nikola Jokic on Rudy Gobert, who can't shoot anyways. So you have some things that you can legitimately play with. I saw the Timberwolves play with putting Alexander Walker in the starting lineup today, which is interesting over Kyle Anderson, who's a player I've long loved. So you're going to get this chess match. And this is where basketball to me becomes just the best sport. There's not that many secrets between these two teams, particularly because the GM of that team was just the GM of this team. And two of the assistant coaches on the Nuggets bench were two former head coaches of the Timberwolves, including one who was himself the former head coach of the Timberwolves. And you've got players on the Timberwolves who was players on the Nuggets. Like, you've got a lot of connections. There's not going to be many secrets. This is going to come down to execution. It really will. And I've watched the Minnesota Timberwolves 2 years in a row find ways to lose, find ways to not execute. And yes, it probably will be a little bit better with Mike Conley, who's a steady hand, a guard I've respected for years, one of the best pick and roll point guards in the league, which is a little bit scary for the Nuggets. But I don't think it's ultimately enough to overcome the fact that their best player has not learned to close games in Karl Anthony Towns. And the fact that their second best player, Anthony Edwards, can throw up an 0 for 9 from 3 at any point in time. So, this is a pretty good 8-1 matchup for the Nuggets. And the star power is honestly with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But I think the actual team, this is a really solid first way to get eased into the playoffs for the Nuggets.
For sure. And it's, like just looking at like who they would have played, with OKC and Minnesota, like there are some staunch sort of differences in the way those teams are built. So it was either like you're going to have like, a tandem of maybe like Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon having themselves a series, or you get the flip side of that with McDaniels being out with that broken hand. Just gotta love the chemistry there between Gobert and his teammates. But it's funny because now like that Jamal Murray Jokic 2-man game will just be that much more amplified on the Murray side of things because of that. Because they're losing a legit, he's not like the best defensive guard, but he can hang with most. So
McDaniels completely changes the dynamic of their team, and losing him is the difference between the Timberwolves potentially pushing this to 7 games and honestly getting swept. This should be a 4 or 5 game series for the Nuggets. They don't have a single guy who can guard Jamal, at least 90% healthy Jamal. I don't know that that's what we're going to get. And unfortunately, if his burst isn't there, then Anthony Edwards can guard Jamal and kind of bully him a little bit with some size and strength. I think Porter is just a huge X factor in this series and stretching the floor and what he's done away from the box score here recently, defensively and rebounding wise. If he can actually capably guard, either Gobert or Karl Anthony Towns, that changes everything for the Nuggets. And, it's going to be Nikola Jokic has to be the best player on the floor, and he almost is every single night. So I'm not too worried about those things. I am, interested to see how Michael Malone deploys his bench. The Timberwolves' biggest injury that we haven't talked about is to Naz Reid. Naz Reid is one of the best backup centers. He should be starting for half the teams in the league. and he's not going to be in this series. And one of the things the Nuggets have struggled with all season long is size off the bench. That's why the Brandon Clark injury was huge for Memphis if they ever play Denver. They struggled with Cleveland's bench, who was huge. Actually had to put DeAndre Jordan into that game. They've struggled with size off the bench. So the fact that the I'm going to do that again, the Timberwolves don't have that guy off the bench, and they're going to have to go to Luka Garza, who, by the way, averaged the second most points per game against the Nuggets in their 4 games this year, which is just an incredible stat. I think is really detrimental to them. And I personally am not scared of a team that's going to have to heavily rely on Jordan McLaughlin, Luka Garza, and Austin Rivers, or some combination of something like that, when the Nuggets instead are going out with guys like Christian Brown and, Bruce Brown. Like it's just, there's different levels to this. And there's a reason why the Nuggets won nearly 20 more games than the Timberwolves this year.
Yeah. And so just because the Timberwolves do have that sort of size that you were talking about, do you think this might be a series in which Malone legitimately might go to Peyton Watson in a very limited window? Like, it's not like he's going to be playing as much, as he was regular season, like, by any means. But, like, do you think he maybe gets some of those minutes?
I see you've been reading and listening to me. Because
yes,
I wrote an article about this for denversports.com this week. I think it came out on Thursday. And Peyton's fascinating, man. Like, after I talked with Peyton in Phoenix about 2 weeks ago, I came away with that going, I wonder if this guy's like a Kawhi Leonard type, where like he was drafted for defense and athleticism at the end of the first round, and just everyone missed him. And then all of a sudden, bam, he pops. Because the way DeAndre Jordan and Jeff Green and the vets talk about him, like, there's something there. Like, people don't just talk about a guy like that. And the way he believes in himself is rather interesting, without actually being cocky, but rather humble. So I really like Peyton Watson. And I wrote this exact line. Can a guy who scored 75 points in his entire NBA career flip a series? The answer is no. But when the entire sport is won in the margins, and when the Nuggets lost the Western Conference Finals because Mason Plumlee couldn't switch on to Anthony Davis, having an extremely switchable defender for a situation, as you pointed out, is a game changer. And Peyton has proven that he can be counted on to go out there and make some good decisions. Now, he's made some terrible decisions too, like leaving Steph Curry open in that Warriors game a couple times when he was rotating. So there's going to be some bumps and bruises with playing him. But if you do play him and he's 6'8", and by the way, your roster only has 2 small forwards, it's Christian Brown and Peyton Watson. Those are the only guys that are actually small forwards. It allows you to do some things, and it allows you to probably match up better with this Timberwolves team because of how big they are, aside from Mike Conley, their starting point guard. So, yeah, I think there's a legitimate case to be made that you will see Peyton Watson at some point. I don't know in what capacity, but it seems like he has earned the trust of Michael Malone, which is really rare for a rookie. Now, the situation I don't want to get into is the one where Michael Malone is not trusting Christian Brown, which seemed to happen throughout the course of the regular season, where he just got pulled from the rotation willy-nilly for no real reason or explanation. And I think it's important because Brown, while Gordon might guard him in the starting 5, I think Brown's actually the best suited. Christian Brown is best suited to guard Anthony Edwards in this series. So will you see Christian Brown stagger with the starters and KCP stagger with the bench? I think there's a case to be made for that.
That would be, yeah. So talk about Christian Brown and Peyton Watson for a second. These guys, as the Nuggets rookie class this year, you got to feel like good about this team also, just with the fact that you've got a guy in Colin Gillespie that's coming up. You have Ismail Kamagate overseas right now.
He's going to be good.
Who might be like your defensive 5 here, and so there's a culture here that Jake and I always preach on Twitter, especially, that the rest of the NBA universe just doesn't seem to quite get. But we don't skip steps here. Michael Porter Jr., what you're seeing right now is a product of that. Like, what he went through, just in totality from, you know, his high school days to right now should be talked about more. And it's quite frankly, it's not. Mainly because he's drafted by the Nuggets, which, like, if he was doing this in like the Clippers, you know, Lakers airspace, any of those bigger market teams, they'd for sure be talking about someone who is having a top 15 all time NBA season as far as the 3-point goes. And he went through doghouse. Like, he was in Malone's doghouse for, you know, months. And it even stems back to like his questionable benching in that Brooklyn game regular season. Like, Malone still was kind of like, okay, like, you know, the starters aren't doing their work, but you're gonna be the guy that comes to the bench. So, but you're seeing MPJ and Malone just kind of build this trust and build this trust over the years, where now, like, especially with his usage, you know, recently, like the last month where they played competitive basketball, which wasn't the last month, like it was 2 months ago, when they were, you know, facing the Grizzlies at home type beat. It, what he's been able to do is, as far as just survive that gauntlet, as far as Malone being a hard-nosed defensive coach and him coming into the league as a purely offensive guy, like, it just says something about the team's culture. People are buying in. You draft two winners in my book, in Watson and Brown, to where Brown has a great pedigree from Kansas. You know, what he did with that Kansas Jayhawks team for their run to the championship, and then how he performed in that championship game, says that he's just an elevator when it comes down to it. Like, he's won a championship at basically every single level besides the NBA. So, and Peyton Watson, the guy at UCLA, like, that's a system where he probably wasn't going to get a lot of playing time anyways, because they just had like 5 or 6 really great guys ahead of him. And that's no like real, like, I don't know, that's no real like slight to him, but it's just Calvin Booth was like at one of his best games of the year. Is big on like why he drafted him too, and he's just like, he's got something different in him, man. Like you were saying, like, people loved the Bones story last year, but Bones couldn't hack it when it came to mainly switching defensively.
Anything defensively.
Yeah, and the pressure just got. But you're seeing guys like Michael Porter Jr., and guys like Jamal Murray, guys like Nikola Jokic, like, who, like, pressure creates diamonds. These guys didn't have any pressure on them, and now you got ESPN saying they're the most pressured team in the league, which I think is false, by the way. Like, I think that goes to the Phoenix Suns, if we're being real with Durant, because people will talk about Jokic's first-round exit all day on Twitter, but they won't mention that Durant got swept with a Brooklyn Nets team in the East. You know what I mean? So, I don't know.
You said a lot there. I think the Nuggets actually do have the most pressure on them out of any team in the league, particularly Nikola Jokic, because if he doesn't do it this year, he's going to be in the Rudy Gobert regular season only player, never going to do it in the playoffs type guy. He's going to be discounted for the rest of his career if he doesn't do it now. Maybe even like James Harden, better comp, because James Harden is an MVP, who, by the way, I think is one of the best players in the history of the league.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the not skipping steps and development stuff. I think where Michael Malone's really excelled is in the toughness aspect. Like, you wouldn't have many coaches be able to pull a team back from down 3-1, particularly on the brink of finally seeing your family for the first time in 100 days. So yeah. I always applaud Michael Malone for that aspect of the culture. I also think he's done some really bad things with development of players. Like, they've absolutely nailed the Porter thing. And they were taking a huge, huge swing, throwing a dart at the dartboard, just hoping for the best, and they've nailed it. Jokic obviously is just an incredible development and draft story of seeing something no one else saw and then developing that and basing a system around that. Like, that takes courage. But in the same time, this is the same program that walked away from Bones, who is a very talented player, and they couldn't coach him to play defense despite him having good basketball IQ and a really long wingspan. It's also a same program that walked away from Jared Vanderbilt seemingly for absolutely no reason. They've also, they kind of screwed up Bol the entire time. They could never figure him out. They've tried their best to mess up Zeke Naji. They can't figure out if he's a small forward, power forward, center. I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone here very soon, but he's a good player, and he's going to be a good player for a long time in the league. What you said is interesting about drafting guys that have had success. I think drafting guys that are actually role players and not stars in college, actually there's some validity to, because Peyton Watson's basically playing the same role he played last year at UCLA. And by the way, and this is my fault because I knocked that draft pick heavily. And mostly because I loved Andrew Nemhard, and I thought the Nuggets needed a backup point guard. And I thought Bones applied to the two. So I think that's fair. Nemhard's had a really good rookie year, was great in college as well. I also thought they should have packaged both the picks, moved up 4 spots, and taken Tari Eason to be their backup power forward / small forward, which would have solved a lot of the problems Christian Braun has also solved. So that's where I was coming from. But you look at what Peyton did at UCLA. He joins a team that was just in the Final Four, returned every single one of their starters. Of course, you're not coming in, even as the 8th best recruit in the country, in getting into that starting lineup. It's just not happening. So he made the most of the situation. But you look at, he's only scoring 3 points per game. Yeah, it's college basketball in the Pac-12, and people don't be scoring, but he's only scoring 3 points per game. That's not good. Couldn't have expected Peyton Watson to contribute in the NBA this year. And I still look at him as a long-term project. I don't really know how much he's going to contribute here in the playoffs. In reality, the only way he has contributed this regular season is in games that absolutely did not matter. So in the long term, I feel good about Peyton Watson. I still don't know that the Nuggets have nailed it. I don't have the ultimate faith in the Nuggets organization. They finally have gone into the tax. That's a huge barometer for them to go into. I also think that they messed up the trade deadline pretty bad this year in getting Thomas Bryant. They had the ability to go get Mason Plumlee and offer basically the same thing that the Hornets got from the Clippers for Mason Plumlee. And I thought that would have been a better deal for the Nuggets. Granted, Plumlee's not maybe the same player he was even just 2-3 years ago, but Plumlee does a lot of the good stuff Jokic does, and he's by far and away been the best backup center the Nuggets have had. And I'm not asking you to put him out there in a game 5 with 2 seconds left and, Anthony Davis going for a buzzer beater, but you're not even going to play Thomas Bryant. You're not playing Thomas Bryant. He's unplayable. Mason Plumlee is playable, and he's going to play for the Clippers against the Suns in this playoff series. So, ultimately, Joel, I think back to 3 things that turned the Nuggets from a team that could have, been a dynasty and won multiple titles around Jokic and just absolutely nailed it. It's the OG Anunoby, Trey Lyles, Tyler Lydon draft where they traded Donovan Mitchell. They messed that up in 5 or 6 or 7 different ways. And they could have drafted Derek White too. They messed that up in so many different ways, so many times that it haunts me to this day. If they had that one more guy, whether it be Derek or OG or, there's some other guys that went later in that draft that were awesome too, they would have probably won a title by now. And it wouldn't have been a question. And then you go back to the 2020 trade deadline right before the bubble, and obviously we didn't know what was going to happen. And they move on from Vanderbilt. They move on from some other things. They get the first-round pick they ended up getting Zeke Naji with, which actually allowed them to trade R.J. Hampton for Aaron Gordon. So this comes with a caveat, but because they actually did get value out of this in the long run, but you didn't get anything usable out of that trade for Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt, who to this day are still very valuable rotation players for a good team in the NBA. So you messed that one up. And then is this trade deadline going to be looked at in the same way as those 2 mess ups? And right now I'm trending towards yes. And I saw the Lakers get a lot better at the deadline. I don't think they're as good as the Nuggets still, but it's undeniable that the Nuggets did not get better. And you can make a case that they got worse at the trade deadline. I loved the pickup of Reggie Jackson. I've long wanted him to come home and play for the Denver Nuggets in Colorado, his home state. but he's not the player he was even 2 years ago. He might give you something off the bench, but we are a Jamal Murray taking a bad ball to the thumb injury away from the Nuggets not having a capable point guard in the NBA again as they roll into a playoff. So I'm on pins and needles about Jamal, not for his knees, but his thumbs. And not because of it's only Jamal, but because the Nuggets don't have a plan B. They really do not. And that's what scared me about trading Bones. And I got he was toxic. I got all that. But you didn't get anything capable of scoring or creating back. I love Bruce. I love Reggie. That's not the roles they should be playing. And you can get away with some of this stuff when you have a generational playmaker at center, but you're not getting away with it in a game 6 for the Western Conference Finals. You're just not.
Yeah. It's just one of those, like, it's one of those weird life things to where Thomas Bryant went off against Jokic and the Nuggets, and he legitimately, like, maybe fooled the organization into trading for him. Had his best game of the season that night, and for whatever reason, like, yeah, you're right. You know, it just hasn't turned out.
And how many times have you seen guys be awesome against Jokic or stop Jokic the first or second time they play him, and then ever after that he just owns them?
It's just
like I don't know how I have more information than the organization sometimes. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And it doesn't happen with them as much with the Nuggets because they're smart. But like half the time with the Rockies, I'm like, how am I operating under more information than you? How did that happen?
Oh, that is the Rockies, though. But yeah, I mean, talking about a team that did not do anything at the trade deadline last year, and I was like, okay, like, I'm about done. I'll still, like, pay attention to them. But
they really messed up the Crone thing, man. Crone should have been gone, and they're never going to get anything for him now.
Yeah, like you and I were even like, just talking about that last year. Like, he needs to be traded along with some other guys. We were talking about that for like a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. With Denver, it's interesting because, like, you're right, 100% correct with all that stuff, with especially with the Jamal Murray thing, which is kind of what, like, I'm still not worried about the Timberwolves. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I still think it's Nuggets in 5 or 6, like, just depending on how things shake out. But as far as like a backup point guard goes, like someone like that, like, you're right, like, if like something happens to him, like, God forbid, maybe you go with like a Bruce Brown in that role, because he's been kind of turning it on late season. Like, he kind of had just a parabola type to where he started out hot, sort of dipped, and now he's like coming back up. Maybe that's someone you trust to give a little bit more minutes, because he's kind of alluded that he actually likes the guard spot a little bit more than one of those 3-4 spots, to be honest, the 3, if he's playing the 3. But
yeah, he's a natural point guard. He doesn't have the playmaking capabilities of an NBA guard. He's just got about everything else plus defense. So you can play him shooting guard, small forward, power forward because of his cutting ability. You can play him at center like the Nets did. So you can do a lot with Bruce. And I think he can get away with being point guard at a high level with Nikola Jokic being your center, particularly when Aaron Gordon's your power forward, because Aaron Gordon's a pretty good playmaker. And you can't forget Aaron Gordon was the number 1 option on a team. I know it wasn't a great team, but you see moments of it when Aaron's on the floor by himself that Aaron takes command of the team, and it doesn't look like they're lost. It looks like they're good. So I've actually been a big fan of when Aaron Gordon staggers, because Aaron has at least an idea in his mind of how he wants to score and how the offense should be run. And I think that's important because when you see KCP, Bruce, Christian, Thomas Bryant and Vlatko get out there, or Jeff get out there together, no one really seems to know what the plan is going to be. And, you could fault a plan for being a bad plan, but you can't fault a plan for being a plan. And this is one of the things I've learned in sports. So many people don't have plans. The Broncos have not had a plan now for 10 years almost. The Rockies almost have never had a plan, said for maybe 2 or 3 times in their franchise's history. So when you look at it in the micro of just having the plan and what you're going to do, how you're going to attack, do you want Aaron Gordon being the best offensive player you have on the floor and taking all the shots? Probably not. But having that idea is at least better than, well, I guess Reggie should get a high screen and roll from Thomas. Like they know they at least has a plan. And I think that's an important thing.
It's tough because like I was always like, maybe we should, like, I don't know how much, if at all, if Malone ended up doing it over the regular season, but I was like, maybe like you try to rekindle that Thomas Bryant-ish Smith connection that they had back in Washington for a little bit before he was traded to the Lakers, because like I was like anything at this point, like to get the
They won them a total of 15 games,
man,
or whatever it was. Yeah,
but yeah, with them, I mean, you've got basically the Suns kind of staring down at you in that second round. Because I think they will win their first round series.
I don't know, man. I feel more comfortable saying this here than I do on my shows because it'll get clipped and people are going to come back to it and say I'm an idiot and whatever if it doesn't come true. But I want to be honest. The Suns don't scare me. They don't. I've tried to be nice. Kevin Durant's one of my favorite players of all time. Absolutely love the dude. Love the way he plays. I'm a big DeAndre Ayton fan. I don't even mind the Suns that much, even though their fans are abhorrent. Like I don't. Like they're all right. I've been told over and over, watch out for the Suns, watch out for the Suns. I see Suns fans going, oh, we didn't really lose that much depth. We traded a guy who just entered the starting lineup this season, one starter and a guy we weren't using for Kevin Durant. And you know what?
They fumbled the bag with Mikal Bridges. Like that's going to be generation. Like
if you're going to skew like the math on this, yeah, you're right. That is actually truthful of the situation, but it's not the real truth of the situation. And the reason why the Nuggets got swept with the Suns, mind you, with no Jamal Murray and minimal floor spacing and no perimeter defense, because this was 2 years ago with a completely different roster, is because
Bryn Forbes at the time. We had
it wasn't Bryn Forbes. Like this was before the Nuggets even had Bryn Forbes a shooter.
Jeez,
this was like JaMychal Green.
Oh man, this is the JaMychal. Okay.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
This would have been JaMychal Green and Shaq Harrison,
Shaquille Harrison, man.
Right, like this is what we're talking about. Like, the Suns fans want to act like this is current. So,
yeah.
The reason why the Nuggets lost that series, aside from Shaq Harrison, is DeAndre Ayton is an extremely mobile and strong defender who can keep Nikola Jokic a little bit out of his spots. At the same time, while the Nuggets didn't have spacing, the Suns could get into the lanes, the passing lanes, with their length because of Crowder, Bridges, and Johnson. They won that series because of those four guys. That's why. And right now, they've only got one of them left. And their backup center, Bismack Biyombo, is worse than any center the Nuggets have on their roster, which, by the way, they've got a lot of centers on their roster. So I am not scared of the Suns. Their fifth best starter might be the 11th best player on the Nuggets, Josh Okogie. And I know that Kevin Durant's just, he's neck and neck. He's nearly as good as Nikola Jokic. Devin Booker's clearly better than Jamal Murray, despite me arguing for years that Jamal Murray is going to be a better player. Chris Paul, I don't think is better than, Jamal Murray. I don't think Chris Paul's better even maybe than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope at this point in his career. But DeAndre Ayton's probably better than Aaron Gordon in a vacuum. The two guys are comparable in value. I'll give you that. Mm-hmm. So, but how do the math in your head, Joel. Do the math in your head. Kevin Durant scores 30 points a game. He's going to score 30. Give you Devin Booker scores 30. Chris Paul scores 20. Let's be nice. So that's 60
points.
DeAndre Ayton scores 20. That's on a good day. That's 100.
Mm-hmm.
Where are the extra 10 to 20 points coming from to beat the Nuggets, who score 120 points per game at home every time they've taken the floor this year? Like, very few times have they not. So where are you getting an extra 20 points from? Is it Terrence Ross, who's unplayable defensively? Is it Torrey Craig, who's not that much of an offensive player? Maybe he has a nice night shooting. I could see it, and he is playable defensively. Is it Josh Okogie? Is it Ish Wainwright, who's an undersized wingy guy? And is it Cam Payne, who gets hot but can't play defense? So I look at the Suns and I say, yes, they've got more talent, and they've got the supreme player in Kevin Durant that they did not have before. But they actually match up less good, or as we call in the industry, worse, with the Nuggets than they did before. So that's why the Suns don't scare me as much. I honestly am not too scared of any singular team in the West. The team I'm most scared of in the West is the Nuggets, because I don't know what I'm getting with them. I don't know how Malone's going to coach this team. I don't know what Jokic is going to do night to night. And, I don't want to wait for them to get down 2-1 before they go, oh, crap, we got to actually go. Because they did that in the bubble. They got down 3-1 twice. They can't do that, get down 2-1 and be like, all right, it's time to go, because then the ball starts not maybe bouncing your way and you're screwed and you just can't get back with luck-wise. So, the Sacramento Kings are a nice story. They're healthy. That's why they're here. They've been healthy all year. They get smoked by the Nuggets in a series. The Memphis Grizzlies, the biggest important player for them, the two most important players for them in the Nuggets series are Steven Adams and Brandon Clark. Neither of them are going to be there. The Nuggets are going to win that series. Like the 4 seed, we talked about the Suns. The Clippers are a joke. The shame is, Paul George might be back by the time the Nuggets win.
17-3 against them since the bubble series.
Yeah. Did you see the Doc Rivers quote the other day? Where Doc said we knew we were never winning anything with this team. It's such a joke. He's such a bad coach. Yeah. Honestly, you look at it, and it's funny to say, as the guy who just wrote off the Lakers actually match up just as well with the Nuggets as about any other team. And the team that obviously is the big Darth Vader in the room is the Golden State Warriors, because they've never not gone and won a title with those core 3 guys, Clay, Steph, and Draymond. But Andrew Wiggins was their second best player last year, and Andrew Wiggins has barely played basketball this year, and I just wonder what's going to happen down the stretch here. They also have some warring going on in their locker room between the younger players and the older players since the Draymond Green punch. And there's a reason why they traded some of those young players for Gary Payton back, so they'd have more of those older players. Jonathan Kuminga, you don't know what you're getting night to night. Moses Moody, you're not knowing what you're getting night to night. So, like the Warriors, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson can get hot. But they don't have anyone that's really going to defend anybody. Like Draymond can't stop Jokic. Klay can't stop the Nuggets guards at this point in his career. So I'm not scared of other teams in the West. And this might be, the thing that gets me absolutely lambasted on social media, but I'm really not scared of other teams in the West. And I don't get what everyone else sees with the Suns. I understand that they have the 2 guys. And, they have another guy who's going to go to the Hall of Fame, who's a shell of himself, and another guy who could end up being an all-star. But they've got 2 guys. One's still in his prime. Another's right at the end of his prime, and they're unbelievable. The Nuggets have 1 guy who might be the greatest basketball player who's ever lived. It's honestly true. And they've got a bunch of other guys who are really damn good, and then a bunch of guys that are really good. And I don't know, man. Like, I think the team with the 1 guy who is, like, the greatest with a bunch of guys that are really damn good might actually be able to top the team that has 2 guys that are, 2 of the top 75 players who've ever lived.
Yeah. So I love all that, man. And just like in general with Denver, you feel like just the media's kind of been like spinning this kind of story about the team the last month, where you and I both know that they haven't had to play meaningful basketball. So, there's fans that are kind of saying like, oh, like what's going on with the Nuggets? And, what's going on? Why is Jokic only putting up 6 points? And it's like, guys, this team has bigger aspirations. Like, I honestly, this is one comparison that I've said on here maybe one other time that I'll say again. This year's version of the Denver Nuggets, they honestly remind me of last year's version of the Colorado Avalanche. To where they are talented enough to where if they hit their right stride and their right streak, they, I'm not saying they'll go 16-4, but they could very easily make a run to the finals if things break right for them. And kind of just to sort of solidify all the points that you were making, people have been saying that the West is wide open this year. I'll agree with them, but it's after Denver. Or before Denver, I should say. West is wide open before you get to Denver. Yeah. The Warriors don't scare me. Like you said, spacing-wise, we're a much better team. Malone realized that Christian Brown is their kryptonite when he inserted Christian Brown into the lineup all the way back beginning in the regular season. And Christian Brown kind of had his little coming out party, and then he sort of rode the bench for a little bit, and now he's so Christian Brown alone.
Look up this, by the way, but I just off the top of my head, Brown, Watson, Zeke, those four, Aaron Gordon, that five, you are not scoring on that five. And the Nuggets, for me to say that they have a 5-man lineup that I'm confident you will not score on for the one of the greatest offenses ever, that is that's the biggest ace in the hole the Nuggets have, is that they have a lineup of 5 guys that maybe can go out there and hold you for 3-4 minutes without scoring a point. Now, will they score? Probably not. It's going to be tough for those guys to score.
But you kind of weather that storm until
you weather that storm, get out in transition, hope for the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's so important, because Jokic is going to play what, Joel? You probably think 40 minutes in the playoffs. He plays 38 minutes a night in the regular season, so 42 minutes. So you're going 6 minutes, 8 minutes a game without Jokic. So if you get 4 minutes in each half of those 5 guys, where you only need them to go -2 or -4 in their plus-minus, you are winning. Nobody beats the Denver Nuggets with Nikola Jokic on the floor. It hasn't happened no matter who has been around him. It's the most incredible thing. The Nuggets, even with Shaq Harrison, Facu Campazzo, were winning with Nikola Jokic on the floor and losing without him. So
Jake, here's the thing, man. Here's the thing. People don't realize that people looked at Will Barton as a legitimate good player.
Well, he was at
Jokic, point. And he was at one point. To our credit, he was at one point. But that last season, when you've got Jokic in the post and you're trying to win a game, a playoff game, and you take you chuck a 3, and you're down 1, I think is what it was, or 2. A 2 ties it, and you've got the most bet this shot in the league with Jokic's mid-range game. And Will Barton decides, you know what, I'm just going to chuck a 3, see what happens.
It's funny.
That version of Will Barton, you saw it happen throughout the course of this year. Gets traded to Washington, tanks there, gets traded to Toronto, kind of torched the Nuggets both games, it sort of feels like, because we lost to Toronto, and then that Washington game we won in Denver, but it wasn't, he went off, I think. But those are really the only times he ever showed up really this season, it seems like. So just with the amount of effect that Jokic has on a guy where he's a year removed from that, and then you throw in, Austin Rivers, you throw in that, you tweeted this out before jumping on here, that the Timberwolves have, they still have that Mike Conley Gobert connection. So that's a core that we
1.25 points per possession on pick and rolls, both Conley as the ball handler and Gobert as the roller, which is elite. That's top 5 in the NBA. But what you look around, particularly in the playoffs, when things are going to get tighter, a lot tighter than the last 20 games of the regular season, which is all Conley played with the Timberwolves, which, by the way, what happened the last 20 games of the regular season for the Nuggets and other teams that were good? They stopped trying. So that 1.25 points per game, when you have Edwards as your primary floor spacer, Cat as another floor spacer, and maybe Taurean Prince or NAW as your floor spacer, it's not really as viable. It's different than when you were looking at it and it was Donovan Mitchell it was Joe Ingles, and it was Bogdanovich.
Nuggets killer, by the way. Generational Nuggets killer, it seems like, in Bogdanovich.
Those guys were awesome against the Nuggets. And you went back to Murray and Porter not being here the last two playoff runs.
Mm-hmm.
The Nuggets haven't had a healthy starting five for a playoff run since 2019. 2020, Gary Harris was not healthy.
Yeah.
Will Barton missed the entire bubble. Like, they have not had, let alone a starting five. You know, they haven't had their sixth
rotation
man and their starting five.
Yeah.
Going back to 2019.
Because you got PJ Dozier now, who played really well in the G League, kind of coming back this year. He was a guy that they were missing too, that got regular minutes as just like another really solid defensive wing at times for him.
He was basically their backup point guard at points.
Yeah, like a great POA defender also with him. Just like he was kind of like
great. He was good, but comparatively to what the Nuggets' other options were, it was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so yeah, you're right, you know, and then like coming back with that, you know, that Suns series, you think about the fact that Will Barton was coming off a multi-month injury, same with Monte Morris, and you're already down Jamal Murray. So your backcourt was just absolutely decimated, like you were talking about, and the Suns were just able to take advantage of that with their lanes and, you know, switching their bigger guys. And it's like, I agree with you 10,000%. Like Mikal Bridges, just the style that he plays, and just how, just the wingspan on him. Jake, he's going to be like, he's about to blow up, I think, in Brooklyn.
He has a chance to be better at doing the exact same thing than prime Kawhi Leonard. Like,
yeah,
in a more modern way too than Kawhi with just the 3-point shooting in the mid range. I'm really interested by that Brooklyn team. What's funny to me is if you had to put a star on that team that would best fit them, the star would be Kevin Durant. But you know, Nick Claxton and Bridges together is endlessly fascinating to me. Then you throw in Finney Smith, who's a player I really like, Johnson, who I love, Dinwiddie, who's my boy till I die. That's an interesting team. I honestly would not be surprised if they pull the upset on the Nets in the first round, or on the Sixers in the first round. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I wouldn't bet on it happening. I wouldn't even bet on it for value, because the Sixers are really good. The Sixers are really good this year. But I've also seen Doc Rivers coach his way into series losses. And I've also seen James Harden, who I adore and whose shoes I will be wearing at my wedding, turn into a turtle in the postseason, and Joel Embiid not have what it takes to get over the top, and Tobias Harris turn into a shell of himself, and Tyrese Maxey all of a sudden isn't a defender. Like, the recipe is there for the Sixers to collapse. However, the Nets, like, they have not been very good since that trade. They've just got too many things going on. But it would make sense that you could stop the pick and roll with them, that you could get into this highly switchable situation. Claxton's not strong enough to stop Embiid, but he is big and long enough to bother him. So granted, no one's really in a situation where you're stopping Embiid at this point right now. So that's an interesting series to me. The most interesting series in the playoffs, aside from Nuggets Suns, is going to be Milwaukee Cleveland. If that happens in the second round, those are my two finals picks in the East. I think Cleveland is unbelievable. They've got the 4 all-star thing going. They're missing a small forward. But they're the only team I think in the NBA with a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. And, you know, I put Milwaukee in that class because they've had a top 10 offense, top 10 defense when Chris has been healthy, and they're a different team when Chris has been healthy. I think they're the best team in the league. But you look at Cleveland, you look at Milwaukee, and to me, they're in a different class. I love the way the Knicks have played in the second half. And in the East, they've actually been playing teams because all the teams in the East have been trying, unlike in the West. And Boston, I think, is a total disaster right now. And I think ultimately maybe their talent can get them out of it. But they have their 4th string coach from last year essentially in this situation. And I think at a certain point in time, your luck runs out. And I think that may be starting to happen with Boston. And we will see. I actually wouldn't be too surprised if the Hawks pull a game or two off on Boston. I think the Hawks are going to get murdered in that series, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just came in there and won a game 3 or something, a la Nuggets Warriors last year. But that second round in the East is going to be really interesting. The East playoffs are going to be a lot more fun and interesting and better basketball than the West Coast. And again, to me, that like I cannot wait to watch Milwaukee Cleveland, and I pray that it's on the nights the Nuggets aren't playing in the second round so I can actually watch it.
Right. That's going to be a good series, man. Like, I think one of the biggest X factor in that Nuggets Suns series has got to be, like, at some point, like it's got to happen at some point, but you got to think that like MPJ and KD are going to go at each other a little bit.
It's totally Porter. Porter's the X factor in that series.
Yeah. Like, I just, especially with how he's taken that defensive leap that we were talking about earlier, he, you know, I wouldn't have said this at the beginning of the season with him, but the biggest reason why the Suns aren't like as, big and bad, like to, guys like me and Shap here, it's just because we've seen this in the Clippers. The bubble series, like, in effect, people forget this. The Clippers were odds-on favorites to win the title that year. They were the team that everyone was like, it's going to collision course with LA. Don't even think twice about what's going to happen in the West. And people just wrote off the fact that chemistry matters, in basketball especially. And with this team now, you're seeing that added chemistry of the Jokic-Gordon two-man game that was on display all of last year. You're seeing, the stuff that's happened with Porter and Murray, everything just all coalesce to the point to where this Suns team, although they did just get Durant, like you were saying, traded the farm for him essentially, and some picks on top of that. And they just, it's too early right now for them, man. Like, they don't have that chemistry yet.
They're 8-0, 10-0 with Durant, and I think 1 or 2 of those wins was legit. Like, it's a really empty 10-0 or whatever the sample size is with Durant. So the first round against,
our bench when we played the regular season, beat them twice
in Phoenix, and it's going to be really tough to judge what they are based off the Clippers. Like, we're going to learn a lot more about the Nuggets from the Timberwolves series than we are the Suns from the Clippers series, particularly if Paul George doesn't play. But, you mentioned MPJ's defense, and I wanted to make this point. I think, just in the top of my head, I think he's been the 5th best defender on the Nuggets this year. I think it's been no particular order: Christian, Bruce, KCP, Aaron, and then Michael. And Michael's not stopping anyone on ball, and he's not stopping anyone in the post, but there's real value in what you do off the ball. And I think Michael's actually been better off the ball than Bruce. Like, Michael's been a really good off-ball defender. And the thing that he does for the Nuggets is, because he's 6'10", and because Aaron Gordon's also 6'10" in your front court with the small forward and power forward, you're matching up against the Suns, you should dominate the glass. And when you are a team that shoots, I think, the 3rd best or 1st best from 3 in the NBA, I don't know where it ended up, but they're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the league.
They're top 5, yeah.
And you're giving yourself more darts to throw at the dartboard based off of those rebounds on defense and offense. That's what wins you basketball. And no one talks about turnovers, and no one talks about rebounding. And that's why the Thunder scared me a little bit more than the Timberwolves, because the Thunder were the best team in the NBA at not turning over the ball, and the 3rd best at forcing turnovers, or vice versa. So if you ran into the Thunder, you weren't going to get many opportunities to run, and the possessions you got were going to be minimized, which, when you have such a great offense and you have a defense that sometimes is questionable, that's the stuff that scares me. So if you can dominate the rebounds and force some turnovers, that's how the Nuggets are going to breeze through this playoffs. That's the difference between them having to fight in 7 with all these teams and actually just breezing through. And I think, not only do I think the Nuggets are going to win against the Suns, I think, like I said, there's a chance that they breeze through that series, and it's a lot easier than people think. And again, I love Kevin Durant. He is a monster. but the Nuggets are kind of well positioned to play against that team because they've learned their lesson. They needed to get the defender who would guard the smaller guards like Chris Paul, Damian Lillard, Steph Curry. KCP, they got him. They got a backup one in Bruce Brown. They even have Christian Brown if they need to go to him.
Yeah.
And they got Aaron Gordon because LeBron James and Kawhi Leonard in the bubble. So they have Aaron Gordon for a Kevin Durant, for going down the line if they run into Wiggins or something like that. They have these guys. They have capable guys at every single thing you could need going into a playoff run, which makes this so exciting because they are healthy. The only real injury they have is to a two-way contract point guard we've never seen play. They have some bumps and bruises, no doubt, but it's nothing compared to some of these other teams who are missing one of their star players, Paul George, Jaden McDaniels, the best defender, the Timberwolves. The Lakers have been battling injuries all year, and who knows where they're at. So I feel so great about where the Nuggets are, and I think the people that are talking about the last 10 games are making a mountain out of a molehill and aren't really paying attention to what happens because historically, April and March records in the regular season do not have any indication of what happens going forward in the NBA. It's all about what you did before the All-Star break and putting yourself in a position. And those teams that win 40 games before they lose 20, which is all before the All-Star break, are the only teams that win. And the Nuggets did that this year.
Yep. I said this at Thanksgiving. I was Nuggets are going to be in first place by Christmas, and they are not going to relinquish it. And my family looked at me like I was crazy over Thanksgiving. Like my little cousin who graduated from CSU recently, he was just like, no. I'm like, yeah, like it's going to happen. I don't know. With this team, and especially with that home record, man, and then you take into effect that their home losses weren't by a lot to begin with, and a lot of them were without Jokic. And you're getting now a Jokic that will care about these games. He's not going to be posting 6 points here, 10 points there. They're going to be going off. And you get a fully motivated Murray. You get a fully motivated Porter. And, it's why the Warriors don't scare me either, because they can't win on the road. Like, they haven't convinced anyone that they can this year. So, like a dream final, I'll ask you this. Before we head out here, what is your dream, dream matchups as far as road to the finals go for this team?
Minnesota was one of my picks, so we're going Minnesota. It would be amazing if the Clippers upset the Suns. That's not going to happen. The Nuggets would roll the Clippers, although we would get a Bones Mason Plumlee game that would drive us all crazy. So let's be realistic. Jamal would go crazy. Yeah. So we would. I'm going Wolves, Suns, and then I think the best matchup for the Nuggets, and it would be awesome, would be the Kings. And I don't think that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it would be awesome if the Nuggets got them. I think Memphis realistically would be a really solid match for the Nuggets. They've taken care of them every time, except for that time they went out to Memphis and just decided not to play basketball. Mm-hmm. I like that more than the Lakers and Warriors. I don't want to deal with the media markets in those cities more so than the basketball teams, because the Memphis Grizzlies and the Memphis Grizzlies are probably a better basketball team than either of those teams. So I think for me it's Wolves, Suns, Kings, and then in the finals you meet the Bucks. And I don't think that you would win that series. Like, you want to talk about who you'd beat in the East. You probably could beat anyone but the Bucks. The Bucks I'd have no confidence in beating. But for me, it would be awesome to see Giannis, who's one of my favorite players of all time, and Nikola Jokic have an all-time final series of small market teams. I love the Bucks. Selfishly, my family's from Chicago, so it'd be easy for me to go spend a lot of time with my family. So I'd love that Giannis Jokic matchup. Chris Middleton having perhaps one last run with the Bucks before he hits free agency. Drew Holiday, and the thing is, I talked about the Kings in the Western Conference Finals. The Avs kind of ran into this last year, where the best team they ran into is actually in the second round with the St. Louis Blues until they ran into Tampa. Mm-hmm. I think beating the Bucks rather than the Cavs would really legitimize Nikola Jokic. And I think if you're going to do it, you do it the right way. I think no one's paying attention up until that point, though. So you can get away with beating the Kings in the Western Conference Final. But if you beat Giannis, who's seeking his second title, who's going to have home court in a team that's tested and has won a finals 2 years ago, Nikola Jokic will go down as an all-time player. And if he doesn't win that series, the Nuggets may never get back there. But you'll say, all right, that I can tip my hat to that one. I feel good about that one. So that's mine. What's your 4?
My 4, I mean, like you said, this Minnesota matchup, I was licking my chops for if we got it, and we got it tonight. So like Minnesota by far, like best possible outcome round 1. I do have to agree with you in the Clippers, they would eviscerate. But as far as like what I would want them to go through, my ideal road would be like I want this team to beat the best. Like I don't want there to be any sort of caveats. So I want them to take care of business versus Minnesota. I want them to beat Phoenix. I want them to beat Golden State. And I want them to, it's kind of wishful thinking, but at least make it competitive with the Bucks. Just because of like the coalescement of like the last 2 years in the playoffs, I feel like that would be just like a chance for this team to get some demons off their back.
It would be awesome from a Nuggets fan standpoint to get the demon off the back of either beating Golden State or LA in the conference finals. Like we have gotten to the conference finals, I think 3 or 4 times in Nuggets history. Yeah. The last 2 times they've lost to the Lakers, and it's been heartbreaking both times. To get that monkey off your back would feel great. But ultimately, I don't really care about that monkey so much as I just want the Nuggets to finally get the monkey of not ever being to the finals off their back. Yes. So whether it's the Lakers, Warriors, Kings, Memphis, or whatever, I don't really care all that much. I really just want them to get to the finals. But you're right in terms of Phoenix and Milwaukee. Like, I don't want them to not run into Phoenix because Kevin Durant got hurt in the first round and then you're making the excuse. I think they can beat Phoenix, so I want them to play Phoenix. When you get to the conference final point, the thinking changes for me because it's like whoever's made it that far, you're going to credit anyway, so whatever. And then you play the best again in the final. So if you've run through the road of Cat, Anthony Edwards, Booker, and Durant, whoever in the conference finals, and then you meet up with that Bucks team, I think that's really legitimate. That's a legitimate path, and it's also one the Nuggets probably bow out in the finals. If you played Boston or New York, I don't think anyone would delegitimize the Nuggets because it's those media markets, and also was just in the finals, and they've had a really good season again. So you get away with Boston. I think the Nuggets would beat Boston, although they don't match up well with them. And I think the Nuggets would murder the Knicks. Like that wouldn't even be close. But, every New Yorker is going to think it's the greatest thing ever, and they're going to respect Nikola Jokic, and the whole country is based off of what the New York media market thinks. So you'd feel pretty good about your GOAT, your MVP after all that too.
For sure. Well, man, that hour definitely flew by. We're already kind of burning the midnight oil over here. But Jake, go ahead and just plug your stuff if you want, man. And I just appreciate you coming on at such a short notice.
Yeah, no problem. Literally the midnight oil because my light's set to an hour timer, so it's about to go off. I already feel it. There you go. I called it. How about that? I know my setup pretty well. You can follow me on Twitter at Shapalicious. That's the best way to find all my stuff. Denversports.com. We're doing really good stuff as a team over there. I know people get upset with my boss, James Marilat, and his takes. They're if you look at them as humor, you'll have some fun. That's kind of my justification. But we do some really good stuff. We're going to have 3 people at all the playoff games, me, D-Mac, Rachel. She's great at her job. D-Mac's a legend. And, we'll have 2 people at all the Avs games as well. So, we're not the Denver Post. I worked at the Denver Post, and there's good and bad things about that. And, I hope that we're relatable. We're trying to relate to young people. That's why they've hired me. And, we're doing something a little bit different. And
I'll tell you, I'll
Yeah.
tell you guys what. Just a little credit to Jake, because he built one of the best Rockies podcasts I've ever listened to, like to date, and just what you guys did. And man, with just like, because I'll be honest, like I never really listened to 104.3 the Fan. I was always kind of like, like, it takes her a little bit outdated, but as soon as I got wind that they brought you on, I was like, all right, like I'm gonna start paying attention now, like, because this dude is seriously talented and just like in what he does, and it's been a long time collab coming for sure. But
well, thanks on the Rockies podcast note. You said that was all me. There was no one helping me with that old Rockies podcast, and it was the most fun I've ever had. Going to Blake Street Tavern after every Rockies game, having a couple, meeting up with fans, just talking ball, having some of the people, some of the players on. It was awesome. And, I just started a new Rockies podcast with the Fan. It's definitely not there yet. It's going to take a lot of time to get there. And it's a lot different when you're doing the podcast for a corporation rather than yourself. So you have to adhere to some things. But, I plan to hopefully build a podcast that's awesome and talks baseball. The problem is the Rockies are thoroughly uninteresting and probably will be for some time. Whereas when I was doing that old Rockies podcast, they were endlessly interesting. So
yeah,
I got lucky.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, again, appreciate you. Thanks for coming on the show. And I don't think anyone's still listening to us, but guys, thanks. Again, episode 50, season 2, just some general Nuggets talk with Jake Shapiro, 104.3 The Fan analyst. Man, super stoked. Gonna get buckled down for 2 playoff runs in Colorado. So cheers to that.
Let's ride.
Yes, sir. We'll hopefully be reaching out soon, man. Have a great weekend, and good luck on Sunday, man.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, buddy. We'll do this again soon. I'm going to run here because I think I got to buy some more Nuggets tickets because my girlfriend's friends want to go now. So I'm going to head over to do that. But yeah, you just let me know. You just DM me whenever, and we'll correspond on whatever you want to do this. I might get a little busy here again if the Nuggets continue to just go on, so we'll see.
For sure. And we'll get Jared on in one of these episodes, and we'll get some abs talk too. We'll chop it up and have
for sure. And I'll be a lot freer as long as the Nuggets don't play starting Tuesday nights in about a month, because the semester wraps up and I won't be teaching anymore. So I'll get some more time here.
For sure.
So, yep.
For sure.
Yep.
Awesome.
Cool. Yep. We'll talk later. All right.
Peace.
Yep. Bye.